Now, from the Signature Bank Studios. If you're looking for the latest news, insight into what it means, and the sharpest opinion, there's only one station in Chicago where you can turn, and it's this one. We're AM 560, The Answer.
Welcome back to The Morning Answer. I'm John Anthony. He's Charles Thomas, former ABC 7 reporter. Charles, you know, you're hearing a lot about should the United States buy or take by force Greenland. You see in China building power plants at an exponential rate. And then we have Donald Trump and his energy policy with Secretary Wright and Lee Zeldin over at the EPA. I wanted to have someone to come on and talk about some of the pressing issues because, you know, as we deal with China, I'm told that Trump may have a couple of tricks up his sleeve. Cohen, he's a senior fellow at the National Center for Public Policy Research, where he concentrates on energy, natural resources, and international relations. Bonner, welcome to The Morning Answer. How are you today?
I'm doing very well, and I'm delighted to be here.
You know, you wrote an article for CFAC.org where you talked about in dealing with China, Trump may have a trick up his sleeve. With China, Trump with tricks, that's quite shocking. What is this trick you speak of, and what would it do, and how will it help American interests?
What Trump recognized, and a whole bunch of other people have seen this too, is that the great beneficiary of the so-called green transition that was going full speed ahead under the Biden administration, the great beneficiary of that was the People's Republic of China. Why? Yeah. Because China controls the raw materials that go into solar panels, wind turbines, and the batteries that power electric vehicles. The United States and Europe did this too by moving away from fossil fuels in the name of combating climate change, actually engaged in a form of unilateral economic and actually, I would argue, geopolitical disarmament, because you strengthened the position of your greatest geopolitical rival. So what Trump has done is he has flipped the script on all of this. He is pushing American global energy dominance. The United States is the world's largest producer of oil and natural gas, also has the world's largest reserves of coal, and he has decided to put that to the good use of the American public. The Chinese were very smart here. They were the ones who saw that they could benefit from the green energy transition. Not that they're necessarily doing very much of this on their own. They're building, as you pointed out in your intro, all sorts of brand spanking new coal-fired power plants because the energy that goes to propel the Chinese economy, that comes primarily from coal, but they have put themselves in a position where they were the ones who were pocketing the proceeds from the West's green energy transition. So you're seeing that change now, and it could well turn out that the Chinese long-term made a very bad bet, because they are now the suppliers have really a chokehold on the global supply chain of all the ingredients that go into renewable energy. And we are finding out, to our chagrin, that these billions and billions and billions of dollars we have put into windmills and solar panels has been largely wasted, that you can't run a full-time economy on part-time energy. It just doesn't work. The math, the physics, nothing works. So this is what Trump is doing. He is also moving the U.S. Into the raw materials, specifically rare earths and other precious minerals that are absolutely essential for a whole host of domestic products, also with dual military applications. China, again, has a chokehold on the supply chain for that and also the processing of that. And Trump is moving in the direction we have our own rare earths. That's one of the reasons he's interested in Greenland, which is said to have an awful lot of this. So the chessboard is being moved around an awful lot, and we shall see how this goes. But I think the direction in which the country is going in this respect is extremely promising, and it could actually greatly benefit the American public.
Mr. Cohen, the rare earths of which you speak, are they in the ground in China? Or where are they around the world?
Yes, they are. But the ones that they use, the Chinese, again, they think strategically. They're not interested in midterm elections or short-term quarterly reports. They think long-term. And they not only control the rare earths around the world. They're in South America. They get some of their stuff from Central Africa. But once you extract rare earths, you have to process them. The Chinese figured that out. And they currently have a monopoly on the processing of rare earths. So for us, it's not only going to be important to extract the rare earths, but we're going to have to set up the facilities to process them so that they can have a commercial value. So it's a great question. And again, it shows how strategically the Chinese have thought about this. And now it looks as if they're at long last going to be having some competition. Turn back the clock 30 years ago, the U.S. was the world's leader in rare earths. That is no longer the case. We're way behind, and it's going to take some time to catch back up.
How much time will it take to set up processing facilities?
Oh, it's going to take a while, I'm afraid, because getting permits in the United States to do anything.
10 years? 15?
Yes, it's going to take years. You're exactly right. I do think you'll probably start seeing things toward the end of the decade. But one of the things that needs to accompany this is permit reform, so that you can do something. And that can be building a new exit ramp off an interstate highway. That can take a month of Sundays. Because of all the red tape that we have to go through, which is also being cut back. But I think the will is there, and I think a lot of investment capital is going to go into this. So stay tuned. Things are going to change.
Mr. Cohen, when you think about the number of treaties, the Montreal Protocol, the Earth Summit, the Copenhagen #1, Kyoto Protocol, the Marrakesh Accords, when you think about how China, how should the U.S. handle the international climate agreements, especially when it disproportionately benefit China while it strangles American industry? Should President Trump, consider withdrawing from more of these globalist pacts?
Oh, yes, he absolutely should. I'm very glad you raised that subject. In his first day in office, President Trump withdrew the United States from the Paris Climate Accord. That was signed by the Obama administration in December 2015. Now, he withdrew the U.S. from the Paris Climate Accord in the summer of 2017, but he went about it the wrong way. He followed the procedures that were laid out when the agreement was reached. It's a long bureaucratic process. What he should have done then, and what he should do now, is submit this agreement, which the UN, which is behind it, declares is a treaty. He should submit that treaty to the Senate for ratification, where it stands zero chance of getting 67 votes to being passed, and that will kill it once and for all. Yeah. If he leaves things the way they are, simply getting out of it by way of an executive order, some future Democratic administration could come into office and get the United States right back into it. What would that mean? Well, under the Paris Agreement, we are, quote-unquote, obligated to cut our greenhouse gas emissions by a certain level, by a date certain. And what the global climate activists have done is said, okay, you need to live up to your commitments under the Paris Agreement. Well, And Europe and other places are finding out that a zero emissions commitment is tantamount to deindustrialization. This all goes under the name of we need to decarbonize.
Yeah.
Well, decarbonization equals deindustrialization. Plants shut down. The European, particularly the German automobile industry, has been absolutely devastated by the transition to electric vehicles, which are now increasingly coming under the control and dominance of the Chinese because they can produce them so much cheaper.
Yeah.
And with the result, and by the way, that same thing would happen to us if we allowed Chinese vehicles, EVs, into the countries. Detroit wouldn't be able to stay in the ring with them in terms of price. So all that is a long way of saying we need to get out of this treaty once and for all, send it to the Senate, let it be voted down, and be done with it.
Yeah. Now let's bring it back to the states. You know, when I served as an Illinois state representative, I sat on the Energy Committee, and I know the IEPA, the Illinois EPA. I mean, they were doggedly tough.
Oh,
and
I can imagine.
When you look at what's happening with the energy companies, when you look at what's happening with farmers, and I don't think a lot of people understand ESG, environmental social governance. What steps should be taken to push back against the radical ESG? Because it truly has infiltrated corporate America.
Right. Those steps, fortunately, are already being taken.
Okay.
ESG was all the rage in investing 4 or 5 years ago. One company after the other adopted ESG policies. There were all sorts of funds into which you can invest your hard-earned money that had ESG written all over them. Well, a couple of things happened. First of all, those funds underperformed. It was really not a good place to put your money. And secondly, the whole notion of ESG, which is closely tied to such things as DEI, but it's also tied to green policies that work radically against average Americans. This ran into real trouble. Several court decisions, really including, it just sounds unrelated, but a Supreme Court decision overturning affirmative action.
Yeah.
In the admittance to colleges and universities. Well, that set a precedent. It's not only restricted to college and universities, it applies to companies and other institutions, meaning that companies practicing ESG and DEI policies were going to find themselves on the receiving end of unwanted lawsuits from the Department of Justice simply because they were in violation of a Supreme Court decision. So you're seeing companies now run away from ESG.
Yeah.
It all the fashion 2-3 years ago, it has come and gone. So this is a very welcome development, and it means that the people are going to be now encouraged to put their money where it can actually benefit them, rather than serving some hypothetical green utopia that is never going to come into existence.
The green new scam comes to mind, in my opinion.
That's right.
So does this ESG now, because they're always creating new names, so will that now fall under environmental justice now?
No, I think environmental justice is also on its way out. Environmental justice programs are run primarily, well, there are a bunch at state and local levels, but at the federal level, they're run through the EPA. Now, there was never any congressional authorization whatsoever for environmental justice programs. And in fact, environmental justice programs were said to benefit minority communities. In truth, they actually hurt them because they kept industries from going into those communities and creating much-needed jobs. Now, the EPA under Lee Zeldin wants nothing whatsoever to do with environmental justice because they see that it harms the very people it purports to help. And the scandal that broke a couple of weeks ago, whereby we discovered that in the final weeks of the Biden administration, $20 billion, that's billion with a B, in grants were handed out to 8 previously non-existent environmental groups calling themselves green banks. $20 billion was given to them. These so-called green banks had no track record of any accomplishments whatsoever, nor did they have a track record that showed that they could handle the enormous gobs of money, taxpayer money, that was coming their way. So Zeldin is now trying to, assisted by Attorney General Pam Bondi at the Justice Department, they're trying to claw this money back now. The recipients were not properly vetted. Nobody has any idea where the money will eventually wind up. The money went from taxpayers to the Treasury Department, the Treasury Department to EPA, from EPA to Citibank. It was parked at Citibank to keep it away from the prying eyes of the Trump administration.
Insane. That is just insane. And you know what? But
it gets worse. It goes from there to the green banks. But the green banks have subcontractors, and the subcontractors have subcontractors.
So it's all the money. Follow the money.
Oh, it's a multi-layered cake here. Anyway, I have recently read that some of the would-be recipients of this are now complaining that they can't access their funds because Citibank has frozen them, probably at the urging, or we'll use that as a polite term, of the Justice Department, which is just trying to find out where this money is and recoup as much of it as possible.
Wow. Mr. Cohen, we have to leave it right there. I really appreciate you coming on. He's a senior fellow at the National Center for Public Policy Research. Go check out his article at cfac.org. Thanks so much for joining us on The Morning Answer.
Okay, thank you very much for having me. I enjoyed it.
You're listening to The Morning Answer with John and Charles. We'll be right back.
Listen to Dan and Amy on your smartphone. Download the AM 560 mobile app today at 560theanswer.com/mobile. Are you an administrator, staff member, or parent volunteer at a private school? Would you like to grow your current